Vendors, MAID stands for Medical Assistance in Dying. This is a legal medical procedure in Canada where a doctor or, oh geez Louise, you gotta be kidding me, that was ridiculous. That was ridiculous. The wind is powerful out here, just yanked my camera over. Guys, MAID is Medical Assistance in Dying. It's a legal medical procedure done in Canada where a doctor or a nurse can actually help a person voluntarily end their life under specific eligibility requirements set forth by Canadian law. There's two ways this can be administered. One is clinician administered or self-administered would be the other. In recent years, some Canadian provinces actually allow organ donations after MAID. So you take your life with the help of a doctor, and then afterwards they can actually take your organs out and help save other people's lives. Some people would say it sounds like a silver lining in a dark cloud. This is allowed in Ontario, British Columbia, and Quebec. Canada is one of only a few countries in the world where MAID and organ donation can ethically coexist under medical oversight. Absolutely sounds positive and absolutely sounds like a wonderful thing. However, sometimes things look a little bit more positive and wonderful than they actually are. I'm starting to think I better take this off. Holy moly. The umbrella itself was making it where I couldn't control the camera. That's much better. Now I gotta hold a umbrella. Sounds about right. Approximately 1 out of every 21 people that died in Canada in 2023 actually died through MAID. Now think about that, guys. That's roughly 1 in every 20 or so people actually ended their life in this assisted sort of way. That sounds like way too many people, especially when you consider that that's like taking out of the 50 US states, that's like taking what, a handful of the states, and all those deaths are attributed to medically assisted unaliving oneself. Very, very scary. 4.7 Canadians died from MAID, or they were assisted in their death from MAID. But MAID is not supposed to be offered for people who only have mental illness. So imagine your mother or father all of a sudden goes mentally insane, right? They can't take their lives apparently just for having mental illness. I imagine that you have to have some comorbidities in addition to just the mental illness. They also don't allow for the underage to make that decision to euthanize themselves as well. So there's all these safeguards, hopefully so that if somebody does take their life, they are an actual person that makes for a good candidate, not just somebody that's having a mental breakdown or a mental emotional episode, right? And not just a kid that thinks their life is ruined when it's really not. There was a 59-year-old American who actually received the first ever heart transplant from MAID up in Canada. Now you might say, okay, that's interesting, what about it? Well, the interesting thing is, we have to ask ourselves a question. How the heck did the American even skip their way through the line to get that first transplant? Because according to Canada, the people that actually donate their organs via MAID, it's supposed to go to Ontario first. Then outside of Ontario, it's supposed to go to people that are on a waiting list for a heart transplant throughout Canada. And then third would be US citizens. They would be third in line. Canada, in case you're wondering, has over 190 people waiting on that heart transplant list. What this tells me is that some way, somehow, this 59-year-old American was given special favor. Now, according to Clayton and Natalie Morris, they are the hosts of Redacted. They said that in recent years, the Canadian government has looked to expand so that in addition to people with comorbidities that are wanting to end their life, it could also be expanded to include those with mental illness and those that are underage. They're even trying to set it up where they can actually have your kids donate their organs without parental notification. We deal with some of those scary situations here in America where parents aren't necessarily in the know what's happening with their kids, but the school does know. So all those situations that happen down here, they're happening up there in Canada with this MAID situation, or at least they could be happening very shortly or very soon. I've been hearing rumors that here in the States, if you look at people's licenses, that's where you can let people know that you're an organ donor, right? Well, I've been told that when they have people on their deathbed, so to speak, and the surgeons are all around them getting ready to do this organ removal, I've been told that there's been more than one occasion where they were ready to take the organs out of somebody that wasn't even dead. As a matter of fact, sometimes they declare people dead and they're actually still alive. Well, apparently up to 1/3 of organ donations through MAID have happened in this same situation where, neurologically speaking, the patients were actually still alive. Now, some of the people in the comments were saying, hey, in order for those organs to be viable, the person doing the donating, they have to be alive, which kind of throws a whole bunch of other ethical questions on this topic, doesn't it? Do you really want the organs of somebody that's dead, that took their life in this sort of way because maybe they just had enough? And then on top of that, do you want somebody whose organs belong to somebody that might have had, long-term illnesses? Is there any memory stored in that heart? Because I've heard stories of people that have gotten organ transplants from people that perished, obviously, and that all of a sudden their behaviors changed. What happens if you take a drug addict's heart? Is there a chance you could actually become drug afflicted, right? What happens if you get a criminal's organs? Do you all of a sudden become a little bit more susceptible to outrageous behavior? Who knows? I know one thing, if my life depended on it, I would be very thankful for the organs. But if I knew the only way I could get the organ was if somebody gave up their life, God, that would be a little hardcore. I don't know if I could do that. If the guy in America that was 59 years old, he ended up getting that heart from the Canadian, right, that gave up their organs. If that ended up happening, is that compassion or is that actually greed? How do you think those 189 Canadians that are waiting on that heart transplant list, how do you think they feel? And I believe there's close to 35 or 40 million people that live in Canada. I find it amazing that out of a country that big, there's only 189 people on the heart donor list. For some reason, I thought there would be thousands of people. There's probably thousands of people that have a bad ticker that just don't know about it yet. Redacted is a show where they kind of make you think outside the box and they bring up conspiracies and what have you. And one of the things that they brought up on the show was the idea that how the hell are you going to deal with the fact that in the future you're going to have rich people that probably try to coerce poor people into giving up their organs? And if you're a doctor, how do you tell somebody, hey, Mrs. Jones, John down the street is willing to perish and give his organs so that you can live. We need to get you prepped for surgery. You need to get over to this hospital right away. And is that a good day or is that a bad day? Again, I would love to get somebody's organs if they lost their life by accident and they happen to be an organ donor. I don't know if I would feel good if they were offered money, for their families to delete themselves. And let's be honest, there's going to be rich people in the future that find perfect donors. As a matter of fact, how much you want to bet that all this information we're giving to places like 23andMe, they'll probably be able to determine who's a perfect match for your organs. And could you imagine actually reaching out to people offering them ungodly amounts of money for various organs. I could totally picture something like that happening in the future. That's another problem when you have people with so much money while other people have so much poverty. It just creates a world of desperation. So here's my question to you, Venters. If you had a family that was huge and you couldn't afford anything, and some rich man offered you $10 million for your family to live in luxury, and all you have to do is simply give up your heart, do you think you'd be willing to go 6 feet under so that your family could live on the mountaintops? It's an interesting question. And if they can do organs now, do you think they're ever going to be able to isolate certain things in our brain that determine our nature and our aggression? In other words, could you take something out of a person that's dying's body and could you put it into another person's body kind of in a Frankensteinian way, and could you make them a great athlete? Because I've talked to you guys about this. Imagine you're an average guy and you marry an average woman, and then all of a sudden you have this world-class son, this world-class athlete, you know, this son or daughter that's a world-class athlete. Where did that come from? Because I see that happen in sports all the time, where you got this stud football or stud basketball player, and then you see their parents, and their parents are these short, average people, and it's like, how did this happen? What would you do if you were super rich and all of a sudden somebody offered you $1 million so that your son could have professional athletic qualities attributed to their body, to their muscles? Imagine if you could actually grow up with a sprinter's legs, you know, or a professional bodybuilder's torso and muscle build. That would be something else. I have a feeling that it's not doable now, but I don't see why it couldn't be doable in the future. So now we're talking no one has to die. Maybe they have these baby cells of athletes in a jar somewhere, and they're able to inject you with them, or inject your children that are still in the womb of your wife, and maybe make a super athlete or something. I think there's a lot of people out there that would do that. I really do. EDX 2308 says, as a Canadian, I am embarrassed to say Canada is the #1 organ harvesting country in the world. We beat China. Look it up. EDX, you can never trust China's numbers. I have a feeling China probably outdistances all the other countries in the world combined when it comes to organ harvesting. But how does little old Canada, with its population of 35 to 40 million people, how is it even in the conversation? If people legitimately want to live, and there's a way that we can take people that have died from drug overdoses, we can take their organs and save people, I think there's a silver lining there. But I just have a feeling it's a slippery slope where it's going to go from a blessing in your life, right? You need these organs and all of a sudden it's there for you. I think it's going to go from that to coercion, where all of a sudden the rich people from America are going to find their way into the first in line, and Canadians that need these transplants are going to end up getting screwed because someone's willing to pay more money. Hope in Jesus says, don't have to wonder where all the homeless have disappeared to. Hope in Jesus, wouldn't that be crazy if the homeless people did disappear and you found out it was for organ harvesting? I have a feeling what happens with the homeless people is they just move down the street and you don't know any better, and then they ultimately do die early because, let's be honest, that's not a very safe lifestyle to be living on the streets. But down the road, these people are going to be offered huge amounts of money, and that money can go to their family members, and all they have to do is say goodbye to the earth. It's scary because that's going to happen. Orville Finley says they're starting this in the UK. Orville, they're starting a lot of this stuff everywhere, and it's probably already in the UK. When you use your imagination and you see all the stuff that's happening in the UK and Canada and here in the US, does that give you a positive outlook? Do you have a lot of hope for what's in store in the next 15 or 20 years? I don't see it that way. I see it like we're going down a pathway where we can't really change our mind. We're stuck on this pathway. And this pathway is one where I think in 15 or 20 years, I think America's going to look a lot differently than it does now. And I don't think it's going to be for the better. I think it's going to be for the worse. I think certain things that the president's trying to do to make things better, I think it'll help in the short term. But as soon as the troops leave these various cities, it's going to go right back to the way it was. And as soon as the next election comes where a Democrat president takes over, all the things that we've started to gain with President Trump, they're just going to be lost. And it's just going to slowly but surely lead us to this route where we're going to be a lot like Canada and the UK. That's my opinion. Mercury Sunlight says these are all the same people who want to abort full-term babies to harvest their organs as well. They can take stem cells from these babies, right, and from the unborn. And apparently there's a lot of miraculous things that can be done with these baby stem cells. Are they going to actually let them be born so they can harvest their organs and then eliminate them? You know, I'm sure there's people that would like to do that. That's what's so scary, that we live in a world where people don't think that's wrong. Me, myself, I think that's about the most horrible thing imaginable. Dvan65 says it's even worse than that. They don't kill the people first. They take their organs while they're still alive. I heard somewhere that they give these people some sort of medicine that makes them completely paralyzed. So even the last second, if you tried to change your mind, you wouldn't be able to tell anybody. And I think the procedure to go from alive to unalive is probably a pretty quick procedure. You know, there's people that'll go on a ride at the fair, and then last second they chicken out. They're setting it up where once you agree to do this, there's not going to be any turning around and changing your mind. I'm telling you, it's really a scary deal. I actually thought about calling my daughter, who is an organ donor, and I thought about telling her, maybe you should rethink this. I'm not saying don't be an organ donor, because I think most of us do it because we want to help somebody in case we, you know, perish. But my God, you don't want somebody pulling on the plug on you early because, you know, your kidneys are promised to somebody. John Hall says, assisted unaliving is a massive step towards dehumanization. We need to step away from this satanic practice. It does seem a little Frankensteinian if you think about it. We're waiting for John to perish so that Paul can have his heart. You know, that seems really, really crazy. Guys, thanks for walking with me. If you would, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Think about starting a walking routine. And if you've never walked before, you can walk with us every day because we're out here every single day. Have a great day. Stay out of trouble. Contemplate what you want to do with your organs. I'll see you tomorrow.